Thank you. The NFL season is just a few weeks away, which means it's fantasy football time. And joining me now is Peter Schoenke with RotoWire. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's great to be here.
Okay, so what is RotoWire? What makes you fantasy football experts?
So RotoWire is based in Madison, which most people don't know, and provides all the fantasy news and information for all the major fantasy football sites: ESPN, Yahoo, NFL.com, DraftKings, FanDuel. We've got about 40 people here in Madison compiling all the information in terms of injuries and who's starting, who's playing, and projections, and it's a lot of fun.
It's incredible that it's right here, and so many people don't know that. So we were just talking about some of these stats. How popular is fantasy football?
So last year, 62.5 million people in the U.S. and Canada played fantasy sports of some sport or another. The vast majority is football. So it's growing every year. It's been growing 15-20% a year, and it's definitely a hobby that has become very mainstream.
And Wisconsin is a huge part of that.
Yeah, Wisconsin and Minnesota are usually the two leading states whenever you do a survey of per capita, who's searching for on the internet, who's playing in the leagues. Minnesota and Wisconsin dominate, and along with Iowa too. The upper Midwest is where the heart of fantasy sports really is.
Okay, so funny story. We talked about this before, but I know the game of football. My dad was a football coach. My brothers played in college. I don't know anything about fantasy football. And, we do some in the newsroom, and people are always trying to get me to play. I'm like, I have no idea what I'm doing. So talk a little bit about, is it skill? Is it luck?
Well, I mean, it's a great competitive endeavor because you, the person who's the beginner, and me, the person who's the expert, can be in the same league, and we both will have fun. You're going to win every once in a while. If we play for like a decade, we'll win once or twice. I'll probably win more than you will. But every year you can be a little competitive because there's just enough skill, even though it's more skill than luck. There's just enough luck to make it even, and it makes it fun. So that's one of the great things you can do. Whereas I think if we were playing golf and you were Tiger Woods or whatever, I don't think we would have fun. And LeBron James, I get dunked on every time. It wouldn't be a good time to play. But fantasy football is a great thing for that, and that's why it's popular in offices and just so popular.
Yeah, a little more of an even playing field. And you were in a league with Bob Lidmeyer.
Yes,
we just
I was,
learned.
and Bob probably beat me more than I beat him. So maybe I'm not the expert.
We should bring him in. Okay, so let's go over some draft strategies. Is there any way you should be approaching fantasy drafts?
I mean, I think the biggest thing you got to do is read the rules. You say you know football, but you may not really know fantasy football. So one of the things about fantasy football is usually that your league is about the quarterback. In quarterback, it's the most important position in sports, but lots of times in fantasy, it's not. So look at your rule. If you just start one quarterback, you may want to wait on him. Or if you start two quarterbacks, it's really important. So read your rules, and the quarterback position is the most obvious one. And if you know football, you might say, well, I'm going to start with the quarterback. I mean, Patrick Mahomes is the best player in the NFL. He doesn't go first in fantasy drafts. He usually goes in the second round, and that's because of the way it's structured. So you got to read the rules and know the league. It's the game within the game. That's what you're playing. You're playing to win the game based on stats, not real football.
So know the rules. What are some common mistakes that people make?
Common mistakes, well, not reading the rules. Good for a lot of hometown players. Just because you know the player, he's on your team, he's the team you're rooting for, doesn't mean he's the best player. You also kind of want to do a little bit of prep and research ahead of time. If you're playing on ESPN or Yahoo or some of the popular platforms, they'll have something that shows the average draft position where everyone's going, and you can get kind of a feel. Sometimes you might be really high on a player, you think it's their breakout season, and you take them in the first round or the second round, and it turns out you could have waited a couple rounds and got some other players in between. So, at a very minimum, do that kind of research just to kind of know where everyone's going, and that really helps you out. Okay,
and really quickly, what players should we be avoiding or targeting?
Avoiding or targeting? Well, it kind of depends on a lot of things, but check on the injuries. There's been a couple injuries late in camp. That's always one thing. Don't get surprised right before you go there. Get a good cheat sheet. There's been a couple injuries late, and a player like Jonathan Taylor, who obviously a local favorite, but he's holding out. Well, not holding out. He's injured. He's had a contract dispute. Is he going to play? You really got to read up on that situation before you go there. Don't just take him blindly. Assume that a player like that's going to play in week one. He may not play for several weeks. Heck, he might hold out the whole season. So you got to do a little research on these players before you jump in there.
Okay. Well, thank you for the expert tips and for being here. It's an exciting time of the year.
Yeah. This is a big draft weekend. Fantasy football is great, and hopefully you can come to RotoWire if you need help and check it out and have a good time drafting it. It's a blast.
Maybe you motivated me to get in.
Yeah, definitely. We got to get you in the league for sure.
Thanks so much.